Hello and hiya to the Morbid Moonlight 31 Days of Halloween Movie a Day challenge that this year sees us looking through the films of the amazing Felissa Rose and familiarising ourselves with her oeuvre. One of the things that I've avoided so far have been anthology films, because Felissa Rose has done quite a lot of them over the years, I guess because they're pretty quick and easy to do, and for somebody that clearly likes a lot of variety in choosing her parts, anthologies must be a pretty good way to spice things up. The reason that I've sort of avoided anthologies so far has been because I'm trying to go for the movies where Felissa plays a bigger part, just because they're more interesting to talk about by way of this being an appreciation of her career. With an anthology, there's only going to be so much Felissa Rose per square inch, and you're guaranteed that she's only ever going to be in a fraction of the film's runtime tops. I was actually planning to review the 2017 movie Claude, but after getting to a certain point I realised that it was the kind of film that's so bad that you can't even begin to critique it. For Felissa Rose fans, here's the highlights of Felissa's very brief sequence in Claude, where she gets to have a bitching row with her friend Tiffany Shepis.
Keep fighting.
No, don't even bring it up to me. It's your fucking dumb cunt in the back. You're such a fucking asshole. I don't do fucking anything. Oh, you never do anything,
just shut up.
Fat bitch.
Would you just shut up? Shut up! Shut up! And let me take care of this.
I think that's more than enough of that, isn't it? But anyway, with that out of the way, let's get on to the real reason that we're here, which is to look at 2018's anthology Lilith. Now, there's two reasons why this is worth talking about. Number one is that it's an anthology in which Felissa Rose is in the linking story, the kind of framing narrative that supports the film's collection of linked little shorts. And number two, because I think that it's the first time that Felissa Rose has been cast as the titular character of a film, unless you want to count to Jennifer, technically, in which she was one of several women in the cast called Jennifer, but that is just a really ridiculous technicality. So the idea of Lilith is that the character represents this kind of demonic force that avenges wronged women by punishing their male tormentors. The extent to which the various characters actually deserve their fates varies from story to story. The film opens up with Felissa Rose as Lilith being stalked and ultimately captured, and as she is held captive, we learn of her various activities up until this point. The idea of the Lilith character here is that she can take any form as and when necessary, which allows the character's visual representations to kind of change from story to story, as the part is played by whichever character is necessary, but each story also more or less sticks to a common theme. And for a low-budget anthology, which this obviously is, there's a nice consistency to the ideas and the concepts. That is important and something that's quite often overlooked, because it prevents your anthology feeling like just a loose group of short films like, for example, this year's Phobias did, and more like this cohesive single film with a through line to be told through a kind of episodic structure, like everything's building up to something that's actually got a point to it. But the individual stories, there's 4 altogether plus the wraparound, all follow this kind of basic EC Comics style structure of people being bad and then being punished, although maybe not quite as much as they should. The issue, I suppose, in providing a variety of loathsome characters to punish is thinking up enough variety to justify their place here. As with a lot of anthologies, it's kind of difficult to really say how good Lilith is as a whole, because the quality of the different stories means that certain aspects work better in one story than in another, so it's more a case of looking at the individual shorts and assessing whether or not they work in and of themselves. I don't think any of the 4 stories are terrible, to be honest, but most of them feel quite thin for what they are. The first story is about a relationship between a young teen girl and her teacher, and what happens when things take an unexpected turn, and it's a pretty straightforward kind of angsty teen drama. I think the most interesting thing, though, is that it features several of the same actors that were in 2016's To Jennifer, which was probably one of the best Felissa Rose films that I've reviewed, even if Felissa Rose herself only had a small part in it. The acting's solid enough, I'd say, but it kind of ends up in quite a predictably messy, bloody way that doesn't feel like it's a story that's going anywhere or's got that much to say. Following on from that, we've got a story about this old man with some kind of illness. He's been given a new home care assistant, a woman named, of course, Lilith, and this story plays out mainly in dialogue, kind of like a two-hander that's this sort of basic, slow-moving stage play type thing. Again, performances are good here, and this probably is the best of the stories, I'd say, even if it does just have one trick up its sleeve that we can kind of see coming. The third story is definitely the flimsiest, about a guy who cheats on his girlfriend by watching, and I quote, anal porn, and he's kind of made out to be this selfish user who doesn't care about the feelings of his partner and boasts about his own sexual prowess, but it's heavy-handed and it feels quite a shallow premise to build a story on, to be honest. Wanting to scratch that itch that his girlfriend can't, the dude hooks up with this kind of legendary call girl named, you guessed it, Lilith, and has his way with her before she turns the tables on him. There's quite a lot of sex in this one, acting is pretty shabby for the most part, and it just seems kind of fairly minor on the list of indiscretions to warrant punishment by demonic intervention, but there you go. The last story is the one that does what all the others have been building up to by giving us the most obvious and justified case of man's inhumanity to woman by featuring a gruesome sex murderer going through the torture porn motions of capture, humiliate and murder. The visuals have got that kind of grimy, beige, blood-splattered look of something like Hellraiser Judgment to them, and it's a little bit jarring quite how nasty and sleazy this one gets, and as is the way with the rape-revenge subgenre of films, of which I'm really not a fan at all. The humiliation and cruelty of our villain is far greater and more explicit than the straightforward bloody revenge. It works as a finale in that this guy is definitely the biggest piece of shit out of all our misogynistic antagonists, and there's not much worse you can do to wrong a woman than serial rape and murder, but it does feel a little bit badly staged and beyond its kind of nastiness, quite poorly thought out. I think it's the wraparound story where Lilith really shines though, because here we get to see Felissa Rose in full kind of camp dominatrix mode, playing the evil Lilith herself with heavy black makeup and leather gear, and she gives a great performance of demonic hissing and teeth gnashing. Seeing Felissa Rose as a demon feels weirdly right, because she really exudes that kind of dark, dangerous sexuality, and she definitely leaps at the chance. For playing the title character and being pretty important to the film overall, you'd think that Lilith would bag itself a high Felissa factor. But sadly, there's at least 80% of the film, which are the anthology segments, that she is absent from, which means that I'm going to have to crank this down to a Felissa factor of 4 out of 10. I think it's really the first time that Felissa Rose has had a chance to play an out-and-out, larger-than-life evil part, as opposed to somebody that is surreptitiously evil, turning out to be the surprise killer or the like, as in Sleepaway Camp and 1 or 2 other films. But as limited as her involvement in Lilith actually is, it's a strong and interesting part, showing Felissa Rose's range and her willingness to embrace a variety of different roles. As for the film itself, well, that is a different question. Considering its budget, it does actually look and sound very good. It's got a really nice legit soundtrack for one thing, and the opening credits are classy and cool in a way that promises good things. The central idea of the character of Lilith is interesting, but whether or not these are really the best possible types of story to show off that character is another thing entirely. To be honest, none of the stories are brilliant. To me, the best aspect really is the framing story, and I found myself wishing that it was more of a film about Felissa Rose as Lilith, doing that kind of Devil's Rock thing, and playing mind games with the characters, holding her captive and getting a chance to do her thing, and it's a rare anthology indeed, where the framing device is actually better than most of the stories themselves. If I had to rate, I'd say the first story is about a 5 out of 10 maybe, the second one with the old man and his care are about a 5.5, the third one about the evil misogynist with his anal porn, probably a 3, and the last story probably about a 3 as well, and the framing story I'd slap on about a 6. Take that as an average, 5, 5.5, 3, 3 and 6, and that gives you a 4.5 out of 10, which for the sake of the fact that I think that the whole is slightly better than the sum of its parts, just because there's actually an effort made to connect the stories together and not just slap any old shit together and call it an anthology, I'm going to round that average up to a nice solid 5 out of 10. It's watchable, it's pretty decent, it's got some cool stuff in it, just nothing at all that really lifts it above just being averagely entertaining. Although that I think that with more Felissa Rose in it, then it could have been a lot better, just because that character has a lot of potential as a legit cool and striking female horror anti-heroine. But I think that should finish us here though. This has been day 13 of the 31 Days of Felissa Rose. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Please consider subscribing, let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you back here tomorrow with day number 15 of the 31 Days of Felissa Rose, and I hope that we'll see you there.